Here is a guy who took on something that both the media, progressive politicians, and the community have been complaining about for years.
That's Kaycee Madu of Edmonton, Alberta. And in case it isn't clear, the guy who took something on is himself.
And here comes, for the first time in our history, a politician with the backbone to actually end that. And that ended up becoming the source of his political downfall.
The source of his political downfall. What did Kaycee Madu have the backbone to end? It was carding. Carding is when the police stop you to gather information, and not necessarily because there's a crime taking place. Research shows that Indigenous and Black people are disproportionately stopped by police. It is a racist practice, and it's controversial in many places. That includes Alberta, where Kaycee Madu was the Minister of Justice and Solicitor General between 2020 and 2022. I'm Nanaba Duncan. Welcome to Black on the Ballot, a show from Operation Black Vote Canada and Carleton University, where we talk to Black former politicians about their experiences. You're going to hear from Kaycee Madu a lot in this episode, which is all about his story. That is crucial for any politician. What is your origin story? Where did you come from? What experiences formed your values?
I think it's a powerful statement that Alberta will have the first ever Canadian Justice Minister of African origin, who is a man who has experienced racial prejudice firsthand.
That clip, courtesy of the CBC News, is from 2020. It's Jason Kenney, then Premier of Alberta, announcing Kaycee Madu as the new Justice Minister. Kaycee is an immigrant. His family lost everything in Nigeria's civil war. He put himself through law school. He came to Alberta and joined the Conservative Party, rising up the ranks. Great story. Of course, we wanted to interview him. But as we were getting ready to talk to Kaycee, his name was popping up in the news. Kaycee had left politics, but his story is still unfolding in a pretty public way. Here's a headline from the Edmonton Journal. Kaycee Madu faces Law Society misconduct trial over 2021 call to police chief. And this one from CBC News. Former Alberta Justice Minister Kaycee Madu to face Law Society hearing. We saw these headlines and weren't sure what to expect, but we did know that getting him to tell his story in his words was part of us finding out what it means to be Black on the ballot.
My name is Kaycee Madu, but my real first name is Kelechi. So I go by Kelechi Kaycee Madu. Elected here politically in 2019 as a member of the legislature for the constituency of Edmonton Southwest. I'm served in that particular role between 2019 and 2023 up until the 2023 general election in May 29th. In between, I served in 4 different capacities as minister and then ended up as the deputy premier of Alberta.
So your name is Kelechi Madu,
Mm-hmm.
but you go by Kaycee.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
It's a long story, but I'll keep it short. You see, when I came to this country about 20 years ago, I was already a lawyer practicing in Lagos. So I came as a lawyer. As with any other immigrant, you have that period where you need to figure out yourselves all over again. Initially, it was tough. My first employment was at the University of Alberta, a hospital, a small unit there called Patient Food Services. And what I did there was to make meals and wash dishes. From there, I went on to work for Legal Aid Alberta, ultimately with the provincial government in a policy role. And then I decided to return back to my profession. And I challenged my law exams, qualified it to ethical, and I could not find a spot to ethical. After hundreds of applications. And one day, a colleague of mine at the provincial government said to me, have you thought of coming up with a formalized name as Kaycee? Because the truth is, where I was born and raised, Kelechis are called Kaycee. So I grew up being called Kaycee, but not as in Kaycee, just K.C. And so this friend of mine says, you know what? That may solve this problem. So I created a name out of K.C in Kaycee. The moment I did that, it opened the articling door for me.
Because of a name change?
Because of a name change.
What did you take from that?
Well, I think for me, it was an eye-opener. In so many ways, it led me to begin to think deeply about the obstacles and impediment that immigrants face in this country. And for me, it was shocking, but at the same time, it was a teachable moment. It was a learning opportunity for me to better understand, as I said before, the place of Black people in this country, especially those of us who have names that are not westernized, and those of us who still maintain our mother tongue. And you hear that all the time in the community, but sometimes there are institutions, our leaders, whether political leaders, academic leaders, institutional leaders, they live in denial about the reality of these experiences. And so for me, it confirms once again that at that point in time that we have a long way to go, notwithstanding the progress we've made as a society.
So this was just one of the challenges, I'm sure, of that you went through being an immigrant in this country. Let's go back to your country. The civil war in Nigeria really impacted your life. Yeah. Can you explain how?
Yeah. So first and foremost, I'm a Nigerian, proud Nigerian, born from the southeastern part of Nigeria, called the Igbos of Nigeria. Between 1967 and 1970, a brutal civil war took place in Nigeria. I would argue one of the worst humanitarian crises that the world has ever seen, but not really talked about in the public square or within the international community. More than 3 million people were slaughtered in Nigeria. More than 1 million children died of starvation.
So what happened with your family?
My dad was a butcher who traded in cattle, owned a butchery business. After the war, he lost everything.
How does that early part of your life prepare you for entering into politics in another country?
It was by luck that I completed high school. From then onwards, I had to fend for myself. I traded on the streets of Lagos to pay my way through the university. And whilst doing that, I had to pay for my younger ones to go to school. I'm talking about elementary, high school, and university.
In Ghana, I know the name, we use the word hawker.
Yes.
So a hawker is someone on the street that is selling some type of item, so that on the streets you have drivers in the cars, and when they get to a certain stop, then all of the street sellers, some of them children, some of them adults, are coming to the window with an item for selling. So you were one of these people.
I did that, and then graduated to taking merchants to offices. I mean, clothing items, shirts, ties, shoes, to various offices in Lagos.
And then you make it. You make it, and then you find yourself here. And somehow you decide that you want to serve in politics. Why?
Because when I came here, it was obvious to me that although Black people have been coming to this country since the 1700s, we are yet to build a community. I couldn't find ourselves in public life. Mm-hmm. And because of my own experiences, my philosophy was already formed before I left Nigeria that first, you have to overcome poverty. Mm-hmm. Second, you have to make sure that you have the tools to survive in life. And you have to understand that government plays a key role in how we build our communities, how we build our society, the type of future that we have. The wealth of the state is controlled and distributed by government.
So that's why you want to be part of it. And you choose to join the Conservatives. Mm-hmm. What initially drew you to the Conservative Party?
My experiences growing up, the need to work hard. When I came here, my first job was washing dishes and making meals at the hospital for people who are going through extremely devastating time in their lives medically. That job opened a whole new world for me. And at the same time, I also saw different economic ups and downs and how they impacted our communities. Anytime there is an economic crisis, people that look like me are usually the first people to be let go. And I saw that when I became a lawyer here. I practiced in labor and employment law. Mm-hmm. So I saw all of that. And for me, the goal was, how do we build a resilient community? When you read the various political party platforms, when you listen to their leaders, on one hand, you hear the Conservatives talk a lot about opportunities, economic prosperity, jobs, growth. Most immigrants that I know, they come here in pursuit of opportunity.
Mm-hmm. So does that mean that choosing this Conservative Party was a strategic move?
It was strategic. There's no question about that. It was strategic in the sense that I am in Alberta.
There haven't been a lot of high-profile conservative Black politicians, but I'm curious about the specific issues you faced while campaigning in regards to your identity as a Black man. Mm-hmm. What did you face?
Oh boy. So it's always shocking when I say this to folks. If you go back to the 2019 general election, and even before the general election, I had my nomination. I competed in my party's nomination in 2018, December of 2018. I won that nomination on December 6th of 2018. It was a three-way contest. I was the only Black man in that nomination contest. There was a Pakistani guy who was a former member of the legislature. And then there was a white guy who was backed by the evangelical community. So no one thought I was going to win. No one saw it coming.
Did you see it coming?
I saw it coming because I know that hard work, building relationship and bridges were the things I know how best to do because of my own history. I knew all I had to do was to go to the community, door to door, sell memberships, talk to them about who I am, my values, and ultimately that prevailed.
So I'm curious about how much support you got from members of different Black communities here in Alberta at the different stages of your career. So let's start with how much people supported you when you first started.
It was tough.
Yeah?
There was. I am going to be blunt and transparent with you. There was. This is a difficult one for me because I don't want to be
It's okay. You can be plain.
Yeah, I don't want my community to think that I did not appreciate their participation. But I would say this, however, there were a lot of skepticism. I was told at that point in time that I was wasting my time, that I would never be elected, that I would never be given an opportunity under the Conservative Party by Black leaders.
How did that feel?
It was depressing. But again, if you think about my history, those are the things that actually strengthens my resolve.
Were they objecting to it or skeptical because they didn't have faith in you, or was it because they didn't have faith in the system?
The Conservative Party. They didn't have faith in the Conservative Party. They didn't think that the Conservative Party represents their interest. They think that the Conservatives were racist. They didn't think that the thing that they hear from the Conservative Party tells them that they understand their difficulties, their anxiety, their fears as human beings.
But then you are elected.
I was elected predominantly by a white population. And I think for me, that shattered that narrative.
And did it? I mean, did members of Black communities speak differently to you about your position and what you were doing? I mean, did the support change?
I wouldn't say the support changed. No, it did not. But it attracted a lot of interest.
In what way?
A lot of people began to look at the Conservative Party a little bit differently. It changed some minds and began to open the door to having Black participation within the conservative movement in Alberta and in this country.
You mentioned that it was primarily white people who voted for you. What do you think it was that made them want to vote for you when you were going door to door?
I think it was, they saw someone who, and I have to be modest about this, they saw someone who was not afraid to confront the challenges that we face at the time. Whilst we may have come from different cultural, ethnic, religious, diverse background, as humans, our fears and anxieties are the same, irrespective of our social, cultural, and economic circumstances. And I think that's what they saw.
According to a recent survey, most Black Canadians who get into politics are either recent immigrants like Kaycee or the children of immigrants. Now, Kaycee Madu is beyond passionate about politics. He gave us a tour of his law office, and his walls are covered in framed certificates of his accomplishments in both law and politics. So why isn't Kaycee Madu still a politician? Velma Morgan is the chair of Operation Black Vote Canada. Their goal is to increase the representation of Black Canadians in politics and to engage Black communities in the political process. They partnered up with Carleton University to conduct the survey.
When you see Black elected officials being pushed out, resigning, or not running again, is because they've come to their wits' end. They've done their best to try to work within the system. They brought their lived experiences and trying to help to make public policy better for and accessible to everybody. But it takes a mental toll on them, and then they have to leave. They bring the weight of the Black community on their shoulders. If they do something wrong, then it reflects badly on the entire Black community. So there's that stress. There's the stress of being able to do the job to the best of their ability, given the environment that they're in. And there's systemic racism within the government, on the political side and on the bureaucracy side. Again, Black politicians are more scrutinized intensely by their peers and by the media. And when something happens, the story gets sensationalized and it feeds into the stereotype and the biases that people have for Black elected officials.
For a lot of people, Kaycee Madu's success in Alberta politics was remarkable. He became an MLA in 2019 and was appointed Minister of Municipal Affairs. The next year, he became the Minister of Justice and Solicitor General. He was climbing up the ranks. Had Kaycee continued in politics, he believes that he could have been Alberta's and Canada's first Black premier, but his plan was very publicly derailed. Here's part of a report from CTV News Edmonton.
Former UCP Cabinet Minister and Deputy Premier Kaycee Madu is facing allegations of misconduct. He is alleged to have undermined respect for the administration of justice in 2021.
You left politics after a highly publicized traffic stop.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain what happened?
Absolutely. So I became the Attorney General and Minister of Justice and Solicitor General on August 25th, 2020. If you remember, it was during the time of the death of George Floyd. The global protest for racial justice for the Black community and the people of color, not just here in Canada or in the US, but around the world. There were protests here in Alberta for racial justice, to end police brutality and police illegal interactions with ethnocultural community. They call it carding here or street checks. And
just to be clear, what is carding?
Carding is it's a tool used by law enforcement to arbitrarily stop people of color for no justifiable reason, simply on the basis of the color of their skin.
Under the guise of what?
Under the guise of trying to prevent crime. But the law doesn't provide legal justification for them to do that. And yet, the data showed that they predominantly carried that out against people of color, ethnocultural people, Black, brown, indigenous people, were mostly the target and the victims of carding. And so when I became AG, I was clear that if we are going to rebuild trust, instill confidence, repair relations with law enforcement, that we must tackle. And I banned it. And I can tell you it was not easy. It was one of the most difficult policy work that I had embarked on. But I said to myself, I happen to be the first Black Attorney General in our country. That must mean something to that community where I come from. And if I, as the first Black Attorney General, couldn't muster the political will to end the practice that people that look like me have largely complained against, then I wasn't worthy to sit on that particular chair as the first Black Attorney General. So I was prepared to sacrifice my political future. And I made a commitment to bring legislation in the spring, in the spring of 2021. I tabled that bill on April 7th, 2021. I was traffic stopped on March 10th, 2021. And whilst I was working on the policy and drafting the legislation to ban carding.
And then you're stopped.
On the morning, I was going to the legislature to speak to the media as to whether or not I was going to disband the Lethbridge Police Service. A minute and 58 seconds of leaving my home. A police officer pulled at my back, came to my car, and accused me of being on my phone, when in fact, my phone was nowhere near me. And I said to him, you must be mistaken.
And what did the officer say?
He said, no, I'm going to go with my observation. At that moment in time, I knew that I have just been carded and confronted with what was going on at Lethbridge Police Service. And in my mind, it was all about the carding and Lethbridge Police Service.
What happened after that?
After that, I told him, I said, listen, if you don't want to listen to what I have to say, then go and write a ticket because I'm in a hurry. And first and foremost, he asked for my driver's license, asked for my insurance, asked for my car registration. I provided all three. As ministers, we don't carry the yellow. In Alberta here, it's called the pink slip for insurance. We don't carry that. We carry a white card given to us by government in the event of an incident or an accident, because the government is responsible for the insurance. And then he wrote the ticket. As I was about to leave, I said to him, by the way, before I drove off, I said, by the way, I am the Minister of Justice. Within seconds, and then I drove off. Because I wanted him to understand that listen, that insurance is not fake. It's not fraud. It is real. Mm-hmm. And then I drove across the street, parked at a superstore, and called the Edmonton Chief of Police.
What were you calling him for?
So the reason is very simple. Number one, in the past 6 months, when I became the AG, we have been having this conversation about banning Carleton. And at every turn, they've always said to me, Carleton doesn't exist, that they don't do it. They will tell you they support it because they don't do it. But privately, they will tell you that it's a figment of our imagination. I said, Chief, you recall all of our conversation around Carleton and the fact that you have told me repeatedly that those things don't exist. Guess what? I have just experienced it.
So you're basically calling him to say, see, this is what I was talking about. This is exactly what we've been talking about.
Absolutely.
So what happens after that? What's the fallout after all of this?
The media. I mean, with all due respect to them, I have enormous respect for the media as an institution because their work is vitally important in a free and democratic society.
What did happen?
They collectively accused me of abusing my power. They said I called over a private matter, that I called the police to do something about the ticket. They said as Attorney General, that was a no-no, that you can't do that. And they called for my resignation. And you know the people that jumped on my neck to call for my resignation? Most of my progressive politician friends in Alberta. On something that they know is true, but the difference is, it happened to a conservative politician. They ignored the facts, they ignored the issue, they ignored the reason for my call, and even when the chief publicly, in writing, in social media, in video, said Minister Madu never called him to do anything about the ticket. And in fact, that was his testimony, both at the inquiry and the investigation by a former justice and at the Law Society hearing. He said, no, Minister Madu called to make sure that he hasn't been profiled. Even then, the media ignored all of that and focused on an Attorney General that abused his power, because for them, the issue is to get to the person. It was about Kaycee Madu as a Black politician, not about the issue.
This must have been, from your perspective, just so frustrating because you are trying to make change over here about a thing that people don't believe, and then this thing happens to you, and you want to highlight that, yes, it happens.
Absolutely.
And then the media, from your perspective, is not supporting you. So this kind of fallout, I understand it must have been so frustrating. How were you actually feeling at that time?
Disappointed, because here is a guy who took on something that both the media, progressive politicians, and the community have been complaining about for years. And here comes, for the first time in our history, a politician with the backbone to actually end that. And that ended up becoming the source of his political downfall.
Do you think this follow would have happened to a white politician?
No chance. In the first place, the white politician would not have taken up that particular cause. That's why it hasn't been done before. And that's why the former attorney general, who happened to be a white politician, despite all those protests, despite all those debates in the legislature, despite all the town halls, said she was not going to do it. It wasn't an issue because the law enforcement convinced her it was not an issue.
So how does all this impact your political ambitions? At that time, all of this is happening.
Yeah, well, it was a huge setback for me because when the media broke the story, obviously this first black attorney general had to step away from his role as attorney general and never returned. It was from there that I moved on to became the Minister of Labor and Immigration.
You were shuffled.
Absolutely. When the traffic stop took place, I believe the goal was to get me out as Attorney General because I wasn't listening to the powers that be on those policy items. And a lot of people saw a change in our party leadership coming. They had concluded then that the leadership of former Premier Kenney was untenable. And the question was, amongst us, who are the likely folks, to attempt to succeed him. And in the names that are being mentioned, you would hear then Kaycee Madu. At the time, I happens to be one of those people that can put together a coalition of people from all walks of life, black, brown, white, Muslims, Christians, Jews, you name it, across the province. And someone with that ability was going to be very difficult to be stopped.
And do you feel that your reputation has been damaged?
Well, for sure, it's been, I wouldn't say it's been damaged, but it impacted the outcome of the last election because I can tell you there were a lot of people who refused to vote for me because of that. If it was not for that traffic ticket, I would still be an MLA right now.
What you're describing is a very hard thing. So it feels like a major loss.
Mm-hmm. You know, for me, I would certainly say that it's a setback, a loss for the province, a loss for the country, and a loss for the community.
Did you also feel a personal
There's
loss?
no question about that, a personal loss, in the sense that it impacted the trajectory of my political career at the time and impacted my family in a huge way.
How so?
Oh, you know, I have 2 teenage daughters. And during that particular period, they were reluctant to go to school.
Oh.
Sometimes they would go to their bathroom, lock themselves up in their school bathroom and cried all day because of the stuff that they were reading about their dad. And so beyond the political loss and the loss of a strong, credible, conservative voice in Alberta and in the country, the difficulties that my family endured were unbearable over something that is allegation that is not true. But that is the price. I've always said that is the price that Black folks like myself must pay. It's a difficulty that we come from. It doesn't matter whether you are a Kaycee in Alberta, whether you are a Kaycee in Nova Scotia, whether you are a Kaycee in Ontario. It doesn't matter the political environment and the philosophy of that particular community or environment. It is a price that all of us as Black people must pay for daring into public life. My experience has always been that I think the media, if it was someone else, the media would have attempted to investigate whether or not this is even true. Did he actually do what he was accused of doing? But there was no appetite for that investigation. That was the shocking, the most bizarre aspect of that whole media reporting.
I want to talk about your own success. What are you most proud of accomplishing?
So when I think about all of those things and think about the protests between 2016 and 2018, think about these personal stories that I hear from the community, Black, Brown, Indigenous people. When I think about friends of mine, family members, colleagues that look like me, that complain bitterly about their interactions with law enforcement, banning Carleton is without question one of my proudest policy work. And second achievement, I must add, on August 25th, when I became Attorney General, if you read in my public statement, I said, I am going to do everything I can to ensure that the four walls of our court reflect the diversity of our people and province. It was what I said when I ran for office in 2019, that I'm going to do everything I can within my power to make sure that our institutions reflect all of us. At that point in time, we have institutions that did not reflect all of us. And the leaders of those institutions and the public service and government, they all talk about the need for inclusivity, diversity, but in reality, they don't practice it. You literally have to force their hand. So I am proud of those things that I helped engineered in Alberta.
With that experience, what would you say needs to change or be improved for Black people in politics?
Participation. Black people must be intentional about politics and clarity of thought about the benefit, the obstacles, and the challenges of getting involved in politics, and the commitment and the backbone to understand that nothing in life comes to you without sacrifice. And the system is not designed to just open the door for us. Be optimistic, be hopeful, get involved, build alliances and relationships, but also be clear, because it won't be easy. And I don't care whether you are conservative or liberal or NDP or whatever political party or philosophy. Our experiences politically are the same. The difference is how those political parties talk about them. Sometimes we carry ourselves and packed ourselves in one political party. So our fortune is largely dependent on one political party. So I say, diversify.
Kaycee, thank you. Kelechi, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Talking to Kaycee Madu reminds me of the words of another trailblazing conservative Black politician, the late Lincoln Alexander. He said, "It is not your duty to be average. It is your duty to set a higher example for others to follow." Alexander served as Lieutenant Governor of Ontario from 1985 to 1991, and he was Member of Parliament from 1968 to 1980. At the time that he served, there were no Black politicians holding such prominent positions in government. That man was by himself. In 2023, Operation Black Vote Canada worked with researchers at Carleton University to conduct the first ever survey of Black Canadians in politics. That survey showed that most Black Canadians, 53%, first run for office because they want to represent communities who haven't always had a voice in politics. 9% said they wanted to change the way government works. and just 4% said they ran to advocate for a specific policy issue. Kaycee Madu might have initially been motivated by the opportunity to give people in the Black community a voice. Once he got into office, he used his voice and pushed hard to change how things work. It wasn't easy. Sometimes that's how politics is. But the road might be steeper for some. 71% of Black Canadian politicians who responded to the survey said they had experienced discrimination while they were campaigning or while they were serving in office. There's other research that suggests racialized politicians get less favorable news coverage even when they're more qualified than their competitors. Despite all of this, when they were asked whether they'd run for office again, 87% of Black Canadians who responded to the survey said yes. Thanks to Kaycee Madu for being part of this episode. This podcast was produced by Media Girlfriends for Carleton University and Operation Black Vote Canada. This show was produced by Garvia Bailey. Executive producers are Garvia Bailey and Hannah Sung. Additional production assistance from Joyce Tran and Aaron Tolley. Research was led by Aaron Tolley with assistance from Taryn Rary, Brittany Andrews, Chantel Jeremiah, and Caitlin Gallant. And our sound engineer is Reza Daya. Funding for this podcast comes from the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council, Carleton University, the Canada Research Chairs Program, and the University of Toronto Scarborough. In-kind support was provided by the Samara Centre for Democracy to Carleton University. Special thanks to Velma Morgan, Wendell Agite, and Wisdom Tete. This episode included clips from CTV News and CBC News. Black on the Ballot is a companion to Black Canadians in Electoral Politics, a research partnership between Carleton University and Operation Black Vote Canada. Again, you can find out more about the research at blackcanadianpolitics.ca. Learn about Operation Black Vote Canada at obvc.ca. We'd love for you to share, subscribe, and tell all your politically engaged friends about Black on the Ballot. Wait, shouldn't we all be politically engaged? I'm Nanaba Duncan. Thanks for listening.